Tax climate. Tax climate is particularly important in the short run, and it's particularly important as we come out of a very long recession because there's an awful lot of pent-up demand to relocate businesses, to relocate investment. There is a natural movement of business around the economy in good times and in bad, but this last recession has really slowed that redeployment that businesses naturally do. And so the fact that we sit in a fiscal climate today that has not only gotten a lot better, we were ranked about 12th on national surveys of tax climate. When we started the survey only 36 months ago, we're now up to 6th in some ranking surveys. That's a considerable jump in considerably good territory. But what's more important is not just the data that I employed here, but the realization that not only do we have a favorable tax climate in most areas, but we also have a balanced budget. We don't have a huge budget hole that's likely to have to be filled in the next 2 or 3 years. And so states that may be doing a little bit worse than us, let's say Michigan in terms of their tax climate, the expectations of anyone who's thinking about relocating a business to that state would be the taxes are going to have to increase dramatically to close the budget shortfalls, or services are going to have to be cut radically. And so Indiana is in a particularly good place here in the short run to capitalize on the fiscal environment that we have. And we're one of only 2 states that have really relatively strong fiscal environments. I know that's going to be tough for many of you to muscle through. I work at a public institution that's been through big cuts, but I'm able to snag folks from California and Michigan and elsewhere whose cuts are orders of magnitude greater than ours. So this is an important public policy area in the short run, and I'm sure you'll hear more about that from the panelists here. Economic diversification within manufacturing is the newest innovation to this scorecard this year. And what we did is we took a measure of economic diversity that's used in antitrust litigation. There are a few lawyers out there that are having bad flashbacks of a second-year antitrust course. It's called the Herfindahl Index, and it measures the square of the share of the market for each firm. So if you have one large manufacturing industry, and there's 24 two-digit industries of manufacturing in Indiana, if we all had 100% of our manufacturing was in one industry, let's say auto manufacturing, then our Herfindahl Index would be 10,000, 100 squared. But if each of those industries, each of those 24 industries, about half in consumer durables, the other half in consumer non-durables, were to have an equal market share, and you were to square that, we'd have a HERF index of about 445. And so we calculated the HERF index for every state in the union and then assessed a score, the lower score being to the state that was less diversified. And so this is an innovation that tells us within manufacturing what diversification here is. And I think most of the other, or what the level of diversification is. Diversification in manufacturing is important, I believe, for one reason, is that it reduces the volatility that communities experience during a business cycle. When we have recessions, and anybody here from Elkhart or Kokomo or Fort Wayne or Muncie knows this story, if you have all of your eggs in one basket, you may have very good times, you also have very bad times. And the absence of a diversified manufacturing base or economy as a whole contributes in large measure to that volatility. Now, volatility is bad, but it's bad because it reduces other types of investment. Businesses that want to invest in a restaurant or a hotel or motel or tourism activities are going to shy away from doing so because of the risks due to the business cycle. And so places like Elkhart are having, even though they're coming back quickly, or Kokomo that we've heard just enormously good news as late as recently as this morning, are facing challenges because of their history of ups and downs. And then lastly on our scorecard, I have venture capital. We pulled out venture capital. There are a number of metrics of venture capital. And let me back up. Indiana receives a C in diversification. We're average in that, which is a lot better than Michigan, which is a flat F. In venture capital here, Indiana receives a C also. This venture capital is important because it's the financing instrumentation for productivity and innovation. And when we look at venture capital spending per dollar of income or per person here in Indiana, we just rank about average. And so that's an important consideration for us because it ties back into that productivity and innovation and how well we'll do over the next generation here in sustaining that A grade in manufacturing or sustaining that very solid B plus in logistics. If we don't have more of that private sector involvement, it's going to make it difficult for us. And that gives us a scorecard. Here's Indiana's scorecard compared to the other states in our region. And so you can see Indiana ranks very high overall in the importance of an equally weighted scorecard. Now, I do something that Dr. Bennett would probably approve of, is I don't give extra weight to one of these categories or the other. I don't say, just like I wouldn't, or my kids' report cards that I've just got, I wouldn't say that math is more important than English. Well, there's economics too. But if we were to look at just a balanced scorecard weighting everything equally, Indiana does very well right now. And this snapshot in time has seen Indiana do very well. But there are warning clouds on the horizon. And I'll leave it at that the rest of the panelists will talk about not only why this is a problem today in terms of human capital, but what we can do to remedy that for the next generation. And the last thing I want to talk about is a forecast. Now, I would love to spend the next hour or two talking about this 150 equation econometric model that's derived this forecast. And you can see one of my colleagues at Ball State on the way out get some graduate credit. That'd be $380. For this, but I won't do that. This is an econometric model that gives us a sense of what happens to this industry here in Indiana overall and in individual cities as we move out of this business cycle. And it's calibrated on data dating back to the 1950s. We use a national forecast with colleagues at Yale University. And what we see is a significant rebound of manufacturing income. That's our measure here, not employment, not total value added or total production, but income of manufacturing workers that should get us back to about the 2006 levels by the end of 2011. All right, so I think most of us this time last year would have been shocked at the prognosis that we're going to get back in inflation-adjusted terms to where we were, which was the high levels of manufacturing income in Indiana. It's important to remind ourselves that Indiana's record manufacturing year was 2007. And so we'll be back to that maybe in 2011 or 2012 to setting record levels of income and total employment in manufacturing. And in terms of total value of goods and services produced in Indiana, record years are before us, not behind us. That said, the last 2 years have been very difficult on this industry. And so even in places where we're hearing good news like Kokomo and Marion and Elkhart and Fort Wayne, unemployment rates remain in the low double-digit levels. And the firms that are making investments or have announced investments in those areas like Chrysler and Delphi and General Motors have yet to add the jobs that would accompany those investments. So that won't materialize until next year sometime, I think. That said, my model doesn't have a parameter for news announcements. All right, so those news announcements tell me that the mathematical models that economists use, which have performed fairly well, at least in timing, if not magnitude, give us a sense that we're certainly on the rebound. And other information like the Beige Book that the Federal Reserve Bank released yesterday and more recent data from the Bureau of Labor Statistics suggests that turnaround is beginning to materialize. At the city level in Indiana, the results are going to vary dramatically. In the places that had the biggest whacks, the Kokomos, the Fort Wayne, the Elkhart, we're going to see the biggest rebounds next year. And so if you just take a look, and I think most of you can see these right here, if you see the Kokomos continue to have lower incomes in manufacturing, I forecast this year, and by the way, it maybe looks like my forecast is a little bit pessimistic in terms of the timing. next year is going to be a great year for them. Next year is likely to be a very good year here in Elkhart or in Columbus that have idled large shares of their labor force. In places where the loss of manufacturing through the recession was not as bad, in Evansville or in Indianapolis, the rebound will be less large because the bottom, the trough was not as deep. In some places where there have been dramatic loss of manufacturers, my hometown of Muncie, the rebound will be very modest because the bellwether manufacturers close from year to year. 2009 saw us lose Borg Warner in Muncie. And so that the rebound into 2010 and 2011 is not going to be particularly bright. But as an industry as a whole, we'll be out of that recessionary hole in 2011. And I think that's important for us to take away, and we look at the economic landscape here. And with that, I will sit down and let some other folks talk. Thank you.